Hello, everybody. It is Sunday. It's a beautiful day here in Los Angeles. Welcome to the podcast Magic is Real. This is the podcast where we talk about all things metaphysical and spiritual, the nature of consciousness, near-death experiences, other spiritually transformative experiences. I'm Shannon. I'm your host. I am a psychic medium with a strong interest in the world of metaphysics, and I hope that you enjoy this podcast. If you do, I would just ask, would you mind leaving a comment underneath, engaging with the video, liking, sharing? It really helps to support the podcast for free. And all you need to do is drop a little emoji. Thank you so much for everyone who has supported, left reviews, and even those who haven't, who are here and open-minded and listening. I'm very happy to have with me today Robert Waggoner. Who is Robert Waggoner? Well, he is a person, and he is an acclaimed author and speaker on lucid dreaming. Having logged over 1,000 lucid dreams since he began practicing in 1975, he is a past president of the International Association for the Study of Dreams and currently serves on its executive committee. Right, currently, I'm
That's
assuming
right.
that's still the
Yeah,
case.
that's right.
Waggoner has co-edited the online magazine, The Lucid Dreaming Experience, for over 20 years, which is dedicated to sharing insights and experiences related to lucid dreaming. He is the author of Lucid Dreaming, Gateway to the Inner Self, and Lucid Dreaming, Plain and Simple. Welcome, Robert, to the show. Thank you so much for your time today. It means the world to have you here.
Oh, well, thanks. Thanks for having me.
It's a joy and a pleasure. And some might say, why do you have an expert on lucid dreaming on the show? Well, my interest in lucid dreaming, I am a not a regular, but I am a lucid dreamer. Dreams have been a big part of shaping who I am. I've been a vivid dreamer, a colorful, vivid dreamer since childhood. And I think that it's really interesting to explore the world of dreams because you can explain them as neurons firing in the brain. But I believe that they are so interesting because they really speak to the nature of consciousness, and that dreaming is entirely spiritual from my perspective and in my experience. So at the same time, we're going to talk about how there is there have been many studies done. This is scientifically proven that lucid dreaming is a thing. I experience it from time to time. And so I'm excited to dive in and talk about it more. Robert, can you tell me about yourself and how you got interested in this very esoteric topic?
When I was a young guy, I had a very fascinating dream life. And I can remember being 10 or 11 years old and having a strange dream where someone would say something really interesting that was really unusual at the same time. And then 5 hours later, I'd be on the playground playing with my classmates, and one of them would say those exact same words.
Yeah.
And that's when I started to think, wait a second, this dream world is interesting because how can I get future information that's completely improbable and then have it play out in the waking world? So that got my interest going in dreams. But it was in 1975 that I taught myself a way to become consciously aware in the dream state. And that's what people call lucid dreaming. You literally know, hey, this is a dream.
How did you do it? How did you figure out how to do it? Because when it happens for me, it just happens. And I'll tell you what, it's always okay, if I have woken up
Yep.
in the morning and gone back to sleep. And that's because of the brainwave state that you're in, which you
Yeah.
can tell me more about that. I'm not sure what brain state it is, but I know that when I'm in it, I tell myself, wait, get it while it's still here. And then it starts to fade. As soon as I start to go, oh, wait, I'm lucid dreaming, and I start having adventures, but then I can feel myself coming back. And I'm like, and it's like I want to stay here, but I know that I'm starting to come back because I think it's on the precipice of deep sleep and awakeness.
Yeah, that there's various techniques you can use to help you stay in a lucid dream.
Good. I'm going to read all
But
your books.
to get to your first question though, here's what happened to me way back when I figured out how to consciously induce lucid dreams. I was reading this book by Carlos Castaneda called Journey to Ixtlan. And so Castaneda was a UCLA graduate student in anthropology who wanted to study psychoactive plants like mescaline and peyote and stuff like that. So he went down to southern Arizona and ran into a gentleman who said he was a shaman. He was a native shaman, and he called himself Don Juan. Well, in this book, Don Juan tells Carlos that you can become aware in the dream state. And he suggested you could do this by finding your hands. And so I'm reading this as a junior in high school, and I think, well, wait a second, where's the technique? I don't see a technique here. And so this is what I did, Shannon. Every night for about 5 minutes before I went to sleep, I just sat in bed looking at my hands while I softly in my head told myself, tonight in my dreams, I'll see my hands and realize I'm dreaming. Tonight in my dreams, I'll see my hands and realize I'm dreaming. I would just say that over and over and over because I knew about the power of suggestion. On the third night of doing this, so I did it every night, for 5 minutes before I went to sleep. I'm walking through my high school hallway, and suddenly my hands pop right in front of my face. And I go, oh my God, my hands, this is a dream. I'm dreaming this. And it was so wild to see that those football player guys, they're really dream figures. And I reached over and touched the wall because I wanted to see what does the wall feel like in a lucid dream. And it was cool and nubby, just like a concrete wall should be. So then, knowing it's a dream, I decided to go exploring, and I walked out by the administration building and I began to look at the bricks. And what was weird was this: even though I knew it was a dream, every brick was its own detailed individual, identity. But as I stared at one brick, suddenly the dream got shaky. And I remembered that Don Juan had told Carlos not to stare at things in a lucid dream. That instead, if that ever happened, you should look back at your hands and renew the power of dreaming. So that's what I did. I looked back at my hands, but then suddenly, if you can imagine, the palm prints of my hands became like just the palm print became like 100-foot canyon, and I'm this little bubble of conscious awareness floating through the palm prints of my hand. And that was trippy in and of itself. And then I suddenly bounced back to original size, decided to go flying, got so excited I woke up. But that was my very first lucid dream, and after that I was hooked. I just
I
wanted
can
to
see
explore it.
why. It is so amazing. And we're going to get into all this. I had a lucid dream a while back where I was walking through an airport and there were all these people walking towards me. And as I looked at them, I noticed I can see every feature on their face:
Right,
pores, whiskers, nose shapes. And in the dream, I thought, this has to be real because how could my brain come up with these faces that I've never met before? And I
right,
wondered, are they faces I have met before, maybe in other lives or in other dimensions? Because they're so specific. But none of them were speaking to me. They were just walking by, and I was note each person looked as distinct as a real person.
right, right.
And I was
It
just blown away.
Yeah, the creativity and the powers of the unconscious mind are just so incredibly fantastic, and you get that level of detail. I remember one time, and this was a psi experience in this lucid dream, but I didn't realize it at the time it happened. So I become lucidly aware, and I go into this restaurant, and I sit down at a table, and I'm admiring the salt crystals in the salt shaker because the light is reflecting off the salt. And I'm thinking a Hollywood designer couldn't come up with a more convincing set, but I know this is a dream. Then something really strange happened. My friend Maureen, who lives in the Bay Area, everyone calls her Mo, came through the door of the restaurant. And so I ran up to her and I said, Mo, this is a dream. We're dreaming this. And here's the funny thing, she had rapid eye movement. And of course, when you're dreaming, you normally have rapid eye movement. And so I thought, she's still dreaming. She stumbled into my dream, but she's still in her own dream. And so I thought, how can I make her become lucidly aware with me?
Yeah.
So I grabbed her around the waist and I started floating up. And I said, look, Mo, we're floating. This is a dream. And her eyes still kept doing the rapid eye movement thing. And I thought, darn. Then I thought, is there another way I could do it? And I couldn't really think of anything, but I did do this. I put my fingers in a peace sign and I shoved it in her face. And I said, Mo, do you see this peace sign? You can use it as a symbol to help you become lucidly aware anytime you want. So I suggested that to her, and then I woke up. So in the morning, I thought, oh, she'll write me an email or she'll call me because I knew she was a good dreamer and paid attention to her dreams. Anyway, none of that happened. About 4 months later, I'm in San Francisco on a business trip, and I realize I have some free time for lunch. And I call up Mo, and she says, "Oh, I'll meet you in Burlingame on Main Street," and tells me the restaurant. Anyway, so now it's waking reality. I'm standing outside the restaurant. Here comes Mo down the sidewalk. And before she says anything, she puts her fingers in a peace sign and shoves it in my face. And I said, Mo, what are you doing? And she said, I don't know. I just felt like it. And then I told her the lucid dream where I had done the same thing to her. So again, how do you explain that? How do you explain something that incredible, improbable, and all? And it was funny that my lucid dream occurred in a restaurant. And when Mo did this to me was right before we were getting ready to go into a restaurant there in suburban San Francisco.
There is no debate. And that is what's so, there is no way. I had an out of body. I was meditating. And I saw, all of a sudden, saw myself spinning down the tunnel that people talk about. It looked like an umbilical cord or a helix kind of a thing.
Yeah.
And it felt not as real as this, right? It wasn't like an out of body, but it was clear.
Yeah.
And I shot through it and out into this sea of stars. And I was just there exploring when all of a sudden I felt the soul of somebody that I know, that I have a very strong
Wow.
connection with.
Right.
And I hadn't talked to this person in months, and his soul was there. And I felt us hug. And I said, I love you. And I said, this is real, isn't it? And I also saw him swimming through water, like swimming towards me in water.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Well, as soon as all of a sudden, I popped back out of the tunnel into myself. And 3 minutes later, he texted me and said,
Oh, wow.
something energetic just happened between us.
Oh,
And
wow.
I said, what was it? He said, I saw stars, I saw water, I saw blue, I saw black. I said, I am a psychic medium and I am shaking because I cannot, there is no other explanation for this.
Right.
How do you explain how we are communicating with how we are having these experiences with Mo and with my friend? What's going on here?
I have been lucid dreaming for more than 40 years, and I have gone down this path very deep. I mean, extremely deep. And I think that's why my first book is like in its 18th printing and all this and been translated into a bunch of languages. But one thing that I discovered on the path is that we all exist, all of our awarenesses are interconnected in a oneness of cosmic proportions. It's really the only way you can explain some of these communications, some of these interactions, and especially one thing that I'd encourage people to do is this. Whenever I have a lucid dream or just a regular dream about a friend I haven't seen in a long while, I haven't talked to them in 5 or 6 months, and they're just never part of my dream world. They're just not a routine dream figure. I almost always send them a note and tell them the dream. And a lot of times they'll respond back, "Oh, you don't know this, but we are moving to London," or you don't know. So, like one night, for an example, I see our my wife and my's good friend Leon, and Leon's a professor at a large research university. But here's the strange thing: I become lucidly aware because I see Leon, but his hand is completely red to his wrist. I mean, just blood red. And I think, why is his right hand so red? So in the morning, I asked my wife, I said, look, would you mind calling Leon because you two went to graduate school together and ask him if there's something going on with his right hand? And my wife calls up Leon and he goes, well, yeah, there's something going on with my right hand. I'm going to get carpal tunnel syndrome surgery here this week. And it was just so amazing. You know, how do you pick that up? We hadn't spoken to him in 6 months, all that kind of stuff. How do you pick that up? And what I think is really behind it all is that we're all interconnected at a profoundly deep level, one that we're not normally conscious of, but on occasion we are conscious of, and get to prove that there is this interconnection going on.
Yeah, I dreamed of 9/11 the night before it happened, but I didn't know what I was seeing because I've never had any kind of premonitions, and it didn't feel like a premonition. It wasn't a lucid dream, but it was a representation because in the dream I was standing at the bottom of a bunch of tall buildings and I was surrounded and we were being bombed. I saw bombs coming down from the sky. Now, I was in my 20s at the time and I was not very aware of world events. I did not care. I was doing my own thing. I didn't even
I,
know anything. In the dream, somebody said Iraq is bombing us. Now, obviously, that's not what happened. However, there was Iraq was and I knew nothing. I mean, I was not watching the news. I was not. So there was some key there, and I was running through buildings. It was so impactful that I called my mom and told her about the dream. And she said, well, that would never happen because Iraq, I forget, she said, can't bomb us or something like that. And she's like, so don't worry. I'm like, but it just stuck with me. Like, I can't stop thinking about it. And then the next morning at 4 a.m., somebody called and said, turn on the news. And I'm like, that's what I was seeing.
wow.
And it wasn't just me. There are reports of many people having premonitions about that. So what's that about?
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what happened for myself.
Oh, yes,
It was
please.
March that year, and I have this dream that I'm looking at these skyscrapers. And for me, that's really unusual. I live in the Midwest in a town. I think our tallest building is 8 stories high. So I do not live in a giant metropolitan area. But I see this skyscraper and I watch it begin to crumble. And I kind of knew that behind it was another skyscraper that had crumbled to the ground. And I wrote in my dream journal. Uh, I, I think I put New York City, the start of a war event, and the war event was skyscrapers collapsing. And I woke up from that and I thought, what is going on? But here's the thing: this was like 6 months before 911. Every month I would have some incredibly just out of the ordinary crazy dream. In one of them, a voice behind me said 911, and lightning were hitting these communication towers, far off in the distance. And a voice said 911, but at that time, 911 was an emergency phone call. And so anyway, this keeps happening. I'm having these 911 dreams, and it gets to be August, and I feel like I have this psychic weight on my shoulder. And I tell my wife, I say, something's going to happen. It's going to be like Pearl Harbor, or the start of the Great Depression, or something's going to happen. And she goes, what do we do? And I say, that's the strange thing. It's not happening to us, it's happening out there. But here's one crazy thing that happened. So my wife and I uh, decided to go to France in September. So I'm
Mm.
sitting there in June on the American Airline website, booking our tickets. And I put, okay, we're gonna leave on September 3rd, and we'll come back September 13th. And suddenly it was like someone was shaking me, like, wake up, wake up. And I thought, what is going on? I said, okay, we're going to come back September 14th. And then it was like I was being shaken again. And then I put, okay, we'll come back September 15th, and no shaking. And I thought, okay, I'm going to book the September 15th flight. We were on the very first flight out of Charles de Gaulle in Paris back to the US, the very first flight. If I had chosen those earlier dates, we would have been one of five or six or 7,000 standby passengers who took forever to get back to the U.S. But the other thing that was interesting, I owned some United Airlines stock, and in June or July that year, I decided to sell it all. And so I say because I think United Airlines went bankrupt, after 911 because airlines had such incredible problems and stuff. So anyway, how do we know something like that's going to happen in the future? How do you pick it up the night before and realize that there's a connection with the Middle East and
Yeah,
and all? It's impossible to explain in a basic kind of linear time sequence. But on the other hand, I think that there are things that they're not destined as much as they're 99.99% likely to happen unless somebody does something incredible. And so that was definitely one of those times, just 911.
I agree. And I also agree with the time because there's no time outside of our dimension. And so everything's happening, everything everywhere all at once. So perhaps we're picking up on that event as if it's happening now, even though it's happening to us in the future. And the thing is, a lot of people ask, including myself, well, why are we seeing it if we can't do anything about it? And I think it's not because we're meant to be able to do anything about it. It's simply our consciousness is unconsciously tapping into this 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 event or this thing, and it is hard to know, oh no, this is going to happen, but what can we do? We don't even know where, how, what are the logistics, but it is fascinating, and it does speak a lot to universal consciousness that we are all one, and we are all tapped into the same sort of matrixy frequency.
Right. It's really incredible. There was a book written about these kind of things like 911 dreams called Premonitions. And it was written by a wife whose husband passed away. Yeah, I think he worked at Cantor Fitzgerald, which is a big bond trading group in the World Trade Center. But she began to get all of these accounts from other spouses about what their spouse had told them, that like 3 weeks before, oh, I'm going to buy an insurance policy and I want to be sure that you're always taken care of. Or there was the one guy who he got to his Grand Central station that day and he was shaking so much, he just got back on the train and went home and avoided 911 altogether. But it was really interesting. The people who had had dreams about it, had foreshadowings about it, had this sense that this was the last time they were going to see their loved one. It was really a remarkable book. But again, this kind of gets to this idea of the actual nature of time. Do we really understand the actual nature of time? And I'm like you. I believe we all exist in a spacious present where everything is happening in basically a oneness, and that's how we can kind of move through time on occasion and pick up things that are going to occur in our probable futures.
Right. Now, I love that this interview came when it did because I just finished interviewing Tom Matt. And if you know Tom Matt, he is a man who can see basically through the veil, if you will, or he can see the matrix that the rest of us, it's there all the time, but our senses block us. Otherwise, too much information. But he has the ability to see through it. So we talked about this, about the nature of, I'm trying to think of how to, what the question is or what I'm getting at, which is this is in alignment with that. Okay, so like everything's happening, everything everywhere all at once. And there is this sort of matrix hologram that we live in, and it's very real and it's very important and it does matter. And it's not, even though I have life is but a dream tattooed on my arm, it isn't, actually, I do have that right there. I forgot that. I forgot to show that to you. Life is but a dream. It is, but it's not, but a dream is sort of minimizing. It's like life is this phenomenal, colorful, insane dream. And near-death experiencers, when they go back, say that was all a dream and this is the reality. And so we're constantly going in between worlds, right? When we dream, and people talk about when you're dreaming, you're actually in a sort of astral traveling or something. But then sometimes dreams are just stupid. Like I have an ongoing dream. It's almost every night where I am parked in a parking lot and I cannot find my car. And when I find it, it's been completely dismantled. And I keep saying every time my whole car has been completely destroyed by some thieves. And now I have to get another car again. And it's like this recurring dream, but that doesn't feel magical to me. That feels just like some kind of frustration. So can you
Right.
talk a bit about just that and what that
Yeah.
is?
You know, dreams provide a lot of different purposes. And so, if you had someone who was a hard and fast materialist scientist, they would be here and say, well, dreams have been shown to help us process
Mm.
emotions, and dreams have been shown to help us file away memories, and dreams have been shown to help us encourage creativity, and also so they can point to all these scientific studies where you see all of that. But and I'm agreeing that dreaming serves all those purposes, but dreaming also serves other purposes. And I think it keeps us connected to something beyond ourselves,
Mhm.
beyond our ego conscious awareness, and shows us that there's more going on here. There's just much more going on here. But for example, this is something that happens to a lot of lucid dreamers. They will be in a dream that you think it's really happening in the moment, but they'll see a deceased loved one and they'll go, wait a second, how can that person be here? They passed away 10 years ago. I went to their funeral. And then they'll become lucidly aware and they go, oh, this is a lucid dream. I'm dreaming this. So in my online courses, I teach people at that moment what I would do once you realize it's a dream and you're there with a dream figure who's a deceased dream figure. First, you don't know, is it a symbol? Is it a projection of your mind? Or is it someone in an after death state and as a spiritual being? And so, what I always encourage people to do, ask a question. What do you have to say to me? So here's an example of that. The first week of 2022, so it's like around January 1st, 2022, I'm walking through this conference room and there's all these people. And around the corner comes my mother in law, Nona. And here's the interesting thing, Nona looks about 40 years old. I didn't know her when she was a 40-year-old woman. I knew her when she was probably in her 50s, mid 50s or whatever. Also, she looks like she's wearing a dress that she herself sewed, and she loves sewing. And that so anyway, I immediately become lucid and I start thinking, wow, she's been passed away for more than 10 years, and finally she comes to see me. So when she walks up to me, we greet each other and I say, Nona, what do you have to tell me? Because if it's just a dream symbol, if it's a projection of my mind, it just might look at me like it's blank, it's empty. It's just there as a memory, as a recollection or something. But instead, she looks at me very seriously and she says, I want you to know that September will be a very important month. And in my mind, I start thinking, oh yeah, this is right around January 1st. Okay, so that's about 9 months away. And I begin to laugh and I say, well, Nona, if you believe September is going to be important, I'm sure it's important. And she looks at me really sternly and goes, no, I want you to realize that September will be a very important month. And all of a sudden, I kind of understand what she's telling me and decide to wake up and write this down. In the morning, I tell my wife, I go, look, your mom came last night, told me this, and I think what she's telling me is that my mom is going to pass away in September. So I want you and we're going to mark on the calendar that the last week of August, we're going to go down and visit my mom, who lives about 8 hours away. Anyway, August comes, we go visit my mom, and the next weekend, the first weekend of September, she passes away of a heart attack. So the beautiful thing was by getting this information 9 months in advance, I was able to call my mom more and interact with her more. And also it allowed me kind of to come to terms with it. Because a lot of times people are totally grief stricken and when someone passes away suddenly. But for me, it really helped me just come to peace with it. So that's the beautiful thing. So was Nona in the after death state? Was Nona a dream symbol? Well, I would say that it's kind of a visitation dream. It definitely appears that she was in the after death state because she gave me information outside of my own conscious knowing.
That's beautiful. I've had one visitation. I'm a psychic medium, and like the Long Island medium says, I don't usually have dreams about my loved ones in spirit. Um, but I saw my grandpa, and he was about 40 years old. I never knew him at that age, or
Yeah.
maybe I don't know. He was, yeah, no, I hadn't known him at that age. So he was 80 when he passed, but when I saw him, he was young, young. And he was sitting there and didn't say a word. And I looked at him and I said, Grandpa, I can see every, I said, it's you. I said, I can see every whisker on your face and every pore on your face. And I said, this is real. I love you. I miss you. And he just smiled and gave me the biggest hug. He was a very quiet man.
Yeah.
Now I know to say, what do you want to tell me? But he didn't need to tell me anything. It was just a comforting, I'm here, I'm healthy, I'm happy, I'm peaceful. So then I wake up, go about my day, and then later, halfway through the day, I looked at the calendar and it was his birthday,
Oh, wow.
which I hadn't thought about. He had been
Yeah.
gone 11 years or something by then. And I realized that's why he came to me when he did. It was just, I'm here, I'm still alive.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it was the clear, as clear as I see, clearer than I see you. His
Wow.
eyes were so blue. His whiskers, I could feel the textures. He was wearing a cashmere light blue sweater, which was not his style, but I could feel it and I could see it.
Yeah.
And I knew that's my grandpa.
You know, it's interesting. So, in a lucid dream, because you know you're dreaming, you can explore, of course, you can have a lot of fun, but you can also do your own personal experiments. You can even do scientific experiments, and there's been a lot of scientific experiments in lucid dreaming. But here in my first book, I have an entire chapter on interacting with the deceased in lucid dreams. And I share the story of one of my good friends, Ed Kellogg, who has a PhD in biochemistry and really a sharp guy, wonderful lucid dreamer. But this is what he decided to do. So, in his community, when an acquaintance or a friend of his would pass away, he would wait 3 or 4 months. And then in a lucid dream, he would try to find them. And oftentimes, sometimes he'd be guided by a guide to where they were or whatever. You know, sometimes he'd find them when they were 25 years old and their hair was totally different. They and they would be surrounded by their hobbies, like let's say they collected telescopes as a little kid or something. You know, now they'd be surrounded, by 100 telescopes, and they would be doing this, that. And Ed, lucidly aware, would interact with them and talk to them and everything. In the morning, he'd wake up and he'd write the family, would you like to hear what happened in this lucid dream where I feel like I interacted with your deceased mother or father? So often the families would say yes, and they would just howl with laughter. They would say, "Oh, you didn't know him when he was 20, but he had a big afro and he had this. And oh, yeah, he loved telescopes. He collected brass telescopes." And all these confirming details that would make a person realize that, oh yeah. But on occasion, when he would go seek out someone who had passed away 3 or 4 months earlier, he would find that they were still in a hallucinated hospital room or our old folks home. Like they still hadn't processed quite yet that they're in the deceased realm. And one time this happened to me in a lucid dream. So my wife's boss, um, his spouse passed away, and I was away on a business trip, and so I knew I wasn't going to be able to make it to the funeral. But that night, I'm standing on a stairwell, and suddenly here comes up the stairwell Harry, my wife's boss, and his wife Dahlia, who just passed away a day or two earlier. And I became lucidly aware because this was so strange. And I looked at Harry and Dahlia and I said, I want to apologize that I'm on this business trip, so I won't be able to attend your funeral, Dahlia. And she looked and said, My funeral? And they both looked at each other like they were stunned, and then they ran down the staircase back the way they came. So sometimes I do think it takes a while for the deceased to kind of grasp their actual situation. And so,
Mm.
so some of the folks who have been in the hospitals for 3 or 4 months before they pass over, well, don't be surprised 3 or 4 months after they pass away that they're still in this hallucinated hospital setting. It takes a while to get it all figured out.
That makes so much sense. Yeah, that's wild. Yeah, this is why to me dreams are not just dreams. And so as I've been having them lately, but my mediumistic abilities have skyrocketed recently too. And I believe there's an ascension happening. There's a lot of talk about this in the spiritual community, and I'm having a lot more lucid dreams. So when I'm in the dream, I suddenly think, oh, I'm in a lucid dream. Oh, this is going to be fun. What can I go do? And it'll be like, what's behind this door? And I'll start walking around and then I'll just look at everything. This is where I mess up, I guess, is I start looking at flowers and going, the last one where I woke up, I looked at a flower. I said, look at the detail in this flower. It is so popped right out.
Yeah.
Or I'll start to feel it and I'm like, oh, I'm fading, I'm losing it. So now I love to talk about, you've talked about the scientific proof. Let's talk about that. What is going on in the brain waves when this is happening, or how do they study people? How do they know when they're lucid dreaming, or how do they induce a state so that they can test it? And whatever you'd like to share about how this is scientifically provable.
Yeah, you have to remember. So I taught myself how to lucid dream back in 1975, but back then I would try to tell people I'm becoming aware in my dreams, and they would just look at me and say, "You can't become conscious in the unconscious, or you're having a dream about a dream, or whatever." Anyway, around 1980 and 81 is when the first scientific evidence came out that proved lucid dreaming. And what had happened? There were two researchers, Keith Hearn in England at the University of Hull, and Stephen LaBerge here in the Bay Area in the U.S. And both of them separately figured out that you could bring a lucid dreamer into the sleep lab. You would put rapid eye movement pads on their eyes that would record their eye movements, and you would tell them in advance before they went to sleep, if you become lucidly aware, move your eyes left to right 8 times. And if you do it exactly 8 times, that'll be so strange that that'll prove that lucid dreaming occurs. And so both of the studies confirmed they brought a lucid dreamer in, both of them did it. And so the scientific evidence began by virtue of that. And so now that's how they do scientific experiments in the lucid dreams. They bring this lucid dreamer into the sleep lab. They say, okay, here's what I want you to do. When you become lucidly aware, I want you to clench your left fist and then your right fist and your left fist and right fist, and we'll have these sensors on your arms, and we'll see if there's any subliminal movement in your muscles there. And so the person is, they're in the sleep lab. They become lucidly aware. They move their eyes, which is telling the researchers, hey, I'm consciously aware in the dream state. Then they would start clenching their left fist and right fist, but it's their dream left fist and their dream right fist. But what would happen? The sensors would show that there was subliminal movement in a left-right forearm pattern, in their lucid dream. So this is how they can do some experiments in the lucid dream state. But the beautiful thing about it is, in lucid dreaming, therapists have realized that if you teach someone who has like recurring nightmares, like maybe from PTSD or something, how to become lucidly aware and just change one thing in the nightmare, then their nightmares basically cease. And so now this is kind of an accepted protocol for ending recurring nightmares with people who have PTSD. They teach them how to become lucid. They become lucid, change something, and then their nightmare cease. And when their nightmare cease, now suddenly they don't have to drink a lot of alcohol or take a bunch of pills to get some sleep. Now they can just sleep naturally because they don't have recurring nightmares. But the beautiful thing is, you also see other people start to use lucid dreaming to resolve phobias, like fear of public speaking or fear of spiders. Like one woman said in the lucid dream, she shrank herself down to the size of a spider and interacted with the spider. And actually, they weren't so bad after all. And so in the morning, her fear of spiders had been resolved. So you begin to see that, wow, there's so many things you could do when you become lucidly aware. In my books, I teach people not only can you access creativity, but you can also use it for physical healing and emotional healing. You can also use it to interact with your unconscious mind, or if you prefer, your inner self. And that's why I call my first book Lucid Dreaming Gateway to the Inner Self. It's the most incredible thing when you ignore the dream figures and just ask a question of your unconscious mind. Sometimes the entire lucid dream changes. Sometimes you'll hear a voice explain the answer.
Mhm.
And it's just truly amazing what you can do in a lucid dream.
That's really well said. I that was going to be my question is there occasionally I will have a nightmare and it seems to go on forever and ever and ever. And it's always about being held captive with, and I tell myself, I have to get out of here. I cannot tolerate this dream. It's too scary. It's too real. And then I tell myself, wake up, wake up, wake up. And then I think I do, but then I realize I haven't woken up and I'm still there.
Right.
And that sometimes I try to fly away, but then like I feel like I'm weighted down, like I can't get up. Because I can fly in some dreams, and I've that's evolved as I've gotten older. When I was a kid, I dreamed I was hovering over the floor, and then it would get higher, and then I jump and fall and jump and fall, and then lately I can sort of soar a little bit, but then I'm like, oh my God, this is scary, and I fall. So, in those dreams, how do we snap ourselves out of that moment where it's really a real terrifying thing based on like some real events where I'm like, this is awful. I can't be here. I got to jet.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting, especially like when it comes to flying. I remember reading one lucid dreamer's dream that she was pretty new to lucid dreaming, but she realized she could fly, and so she'd start flying really, really high, and then she would look down and see how high up she was, and then she'd get a little bit of fearful concern, and she'd start to plummet to the ground. But then she'd think, wait a second, this is my dream. I can do
Yep.
what I want. And she'd start to fly again, really, really high. Then she'd look down and start to plummet because she got afraid. And finally, she heard this non visible voice that I think is really our inner self. And it said to her very clearly, doubt is gravity. And so this really was a wake up call for her because she said the next week she went to a job interview and things were going pretty good. And then they asked her a really tough question. And suddenly this lucid dream came to her that if she answered in a doubtful way about her abilities, that she was going to lose the job. But if she remembered, her incredible abilities and she answered, in the light of her incredible abilities and got the job. But one thing that's really important to understand about lucid dreaming, it oftentimes will reflect our thinking back to us. So if we're afraid, then the scary things gets even scarier. But if we think, wait a second, those are dream zombies. Dream zombies can't help hurt me. Then they'll turn into little golden Labradors, who just want their bellies rubbed or something like that. So it's amazing when you get deeper into lucid dreams. You see, okay, I really gotta watch how my mind is going here because if I get too afraid, it's going to make the situation worse than it already is.
Which is exactly the same as life and how we manifest, what you believe is what you will see. And
Right.
it's not about positive thinking in the toxic positivity way, but
Yeah.
it's really the more we focus on our fears, the more our fears come to fruition. The more we focus on our gratitude or the things that are going well, the more we notice other good things. And that helps us stay in that state of receiving. And then we start to see evidence that no, I am fortunate, things are going my way, even if obviously in life things won't always go our way because there'd be no contrast.
Right. I'll tell you an incredible story that happened. So one time I was in Seattle giving a workshop, a weekend workshop, and this guy walks in and he said, "Your second book saved my life." And I thought, oh yeah, yeah, whatever. Then his wife came up to me and said, "No, really, your second book saved his life." And I go, "Okay, tell me the story." So the guy looked like he's about 40 years old. He said he grew up in a real dysfunctional family and people were always attacking each other, always belittling each other. And he said, as a little kid, he began to have nightmares that pretty much just reflected what was going on in his family, people attacking each other, people, whatever. And so after a while, as a little kid, he learned how to become lucidly aware. And he'd go, and he began to realize when he was dreaming and it was a dream monster who was attacking him. So he basically developed two strategies. He either ran away and hid, or he fought the dream monster. He knew it was a dream, but he would still fight him. So he's reading my book. And in my book, I say there's a different path you can take. Send the aggressive, angry dream figure what it lacks. If it's full of hate, send it love. If it needs compassion, send it all the compassion you have. If it's not accepted, send it acceptance. Whatever it lacks, send it to it. So this guy who is 40 years old, grew up in this dysfunctional family, just had recurring nightmares all the time, became lucid as a result. He began to do that instead. In all of it, he said he started in all of his lucid dreams to send love and compassion to every dream figure. No matter how mean and nasty they were, he would just send them love and compassion. And oftentimes, here's what happened. If you send, if you meet an angry dream figure and send it love and compassion, suddenly it begins to shrink. And sometimes it'll become just like a little kid who wants a hug. Or sometimes if you send it total love and total compassion, it'll burst into light and the light will come back into you. So here's what he said happened. He began sending love and compassion in all his lucid dreams each night to his dream figures. He said after 2 weeks, the guys at work started to actually help him. He was the foreman of a engineering group. They all became nice and started to help him, and they weren't the jerks they had been like they had for years before. And then he said, after a month of doing this, the craziest thing happened. His family, his extended family, suddenly became loving and caring and began to talk about spiritual concepts, like forgiveness and gratitude and all these things. He said it was a complete 180 shift from what he had grown up with. And he said, just this idea that in a lucid dream you could send love and compassion, it began to clean out his inner atmosphere. And without doing anything different in the waking world, suddenly his waking world just began to change to reflect that he had come to peace on an inner level with all this stuff. And his outer world totally changed.
As above, so below comes to mind. And this is reminds me of The Wizard of Oz is very, very important to me. It's very significant in my childhood and how I connected with it as a child. And when you said that in the characters in his dream, he would send them love, it's like, each one of the characters in her dream represented someone she knew. So the lion, the and it yeah, they were symbols of the people in her life. And so she had this adventure with them on the other side, but they were all just representations of the actual people in her life.
Right.
And that is so amazing to me too, that our brains or whatever is happening, our consciousness, this is how I know there's more to dreams for me, is that something happens in your day and it makes you feel a certain way. Maybe you feel disempowered or your feelings are hurt. Then you fall asleep and you have a dream where it's not the same situation, but it's like characters playing out a totally different scene where the feelings are the same that are coming up.
Right.
And I always think that can't be coming from my I'm not that creative. I mean, I wouldn't be able to make this up. This is
Yeah.
sort of like God or source or whatever you want to call it, creating a scenario with the same theme to help me work through the feelings, even if I don't actually work through them. Like the thing about my car constantly being dismantled by like thieves and they just break my whole car apart and steal it. And I'm always like, can I ever just come to a parking lot? And it's always that I parked in a place where there wasn't a sign, and then I find out that I wasn't supposed to park there and they're charging me like $100 a day and the car gets destroyed. So it's basically like, oh, okay, this dream goes on and on and on and has for years. So I'm like, this has to do with me feeling like I'm not getting ahead, like there's something. And so maybe I have to figure out in this dream how to fix the car, like get the car doesn't get stolen, or I do find it, but it has to do with me working out. Man, it just feels like it's so hard to get ahead. Like
Yeah.
that's I'm always like just about to get somewhere, and then but it's like which came first, the chicken or the egg, that belief,
Yeah.
or the yeah, it's like, or am I just constantly reliving that story in my mind, or what's going on there?
You know, in my first book, I have an entire chapter on using lucid dreams for healing.
Oh, great.
And it's incredible, some of the stories. So I include about a dozen stories of people who've used lucid dreaming for healing. And sometimes these were issues they'd been going to doctors, trying everything that modern medicine could do, but still they hadn't achieved the healing. And then within a lucid dream, they got healed. But I remember, so I wrote my first book, and I think it was the next summer. I was out in the garden in August, and I was beginning to fear that, oh, by the end of August, there'll be so much pollen in the air, I'll have hay fever again. And then I thought, well, wait a second. I just wrote a book, that I have a whole chapter about healing yourself in lucid dreams. And so I know the mind is really important in healing. So I did what we call lucid living. So I took the ideas from lucid dreaming and I brought it into the waking world. And so this is what I did. Every time I began to think about hay fever or fearing August and September when hay fever would appear, first I mindfully observed it. You have to become aware of what's going on in your own mind. So first I became aware of it. Then I would say, no, not anymore. That's what I'd tell myself inside my head. Then I realized I have to tell my unconscious mind what I want. So what do I want? Oh, I want to breathe easily and naturally. And so I would tell myself, nope, not anymore. This year, I breathe easily and naturally. And I'll tell you what happened. The first year, I had a 70% reduction in symptoms just by stopping my mental, that same loop of, oh no, here it comes, pollen. Oh, I can't breathe. I'll wake up at night. Oh, it'll be horrible. Anyway, the next year, I had a 90% reduction. The next year, I had a 95% reduction. Now I don't even have hay fever. I don't think about it. It's not part of my belief system anymore. But again, it took me that had to mindfully notice what I was thinking, had to tell myself, nope, not anymore, had to tell myself what I wanted. This year I breathe easily and naturally. And so that's part of the thing that I realize sometimes in dreamings, especially when we have recurring dreams. A belief is kind of a habitual idea that we tell ourselves. And we've got to change what we're telling ourselves. So if I thought, okay, I'm not going to get ahead, then I go, wait, there's that thought again. No, not anymore. This time I'm going to succeed and achieve my goals. And if I began to stop, that concern, that negative belief, and replace it with the new belief, the positive, oh, this time I'm going to get ahead. I bet you would find, if that's what the issue of the car is with, that suddenly that car dream would stop appearing and all. But you're right. Sometimes those recurring dreams is a little bit hard to figure out what's going on. There's a wonderful woman, Gail Delaney, who has written books on dream interpretation. One thing that she would always do on these kind of dreams, she would ask, what is going on in my current life where I feel like this?
Mm.
Where am I? What's going on in my current life where I feel like I'm having to pay for something that's not fair? Or what's going on in my current life where I feel like, I'm being mistreated? And then you'll think, oh, it has to do with now I see it. Now I see that, oh, that's the place in my life where I feel like I'm getting kind of ripped off or whatever it is.
That's so, yeah, I even do that. Some of my friends are like, "Wow, you're so good." But what I learned, this is something I learned. It's so simple, and it makes me sound like I'm a really good therapist, but I'm not. It's something I learned in 12-step recovery, which is if it's hysterical, it's historical. So, meaning,
Oh, wow.
and the word hysterical doesn't mean you're overreacting. It's just if you have a big reaction to something,
Yeah.
what is this really about? Because
Yeah.
it's probably not, even if somebody is a jerk and says something rude, who cares?
Yeah.
unless it's triggering you because of something. So, and I recently walked myself through a whole thing where somebody said something to me and I burst out in sobbing, feeling so much anger and so defensive and so upset. And I was sobbing and sobbing. And I'm like, why am I having this reaction to
Right.
this person I don't care that much about? And I was like, okay, I'm sobbing. So what is this triggering for me? I worked myself through a fourth step. Okay, well, this is making me feel disempowered. Why is it making me feel disempowered? It's making me feel that way because it's triggering old feelings of me being too much. Okay, why do I feel like I'm too much? Going down the questions to the point where I worked through it and was like, oh, I'm not really mad at her. She's just setting her boundaries for her comfort. It has nothing to do with me, but I'm feeling this way because of something deeper that this triggered. So then I was like, I'm okay now. But it took like 4 hours of me hysterical and then like working myself through it, talking myself through it, sobbing it out, and realizing, okay, I just needed to heal that. That's clearly a wound that came up for me that still isn't buried. As much work as I've done, that I still have a wound around feeling like I'm too much.
Yeah.
Or, and I'm like, that's it. That's it. Otherwise, I'd be like, whatever, lady, you're crazy, And so I think it can apply to those things too, is let's ask ourselves, why do I have the car dream? Because I've had historically some feeling like every time I try to make money, then some huge expense comes up and then I'm in debt again. And it's like,
Yeah.
how do we change that story? Which I've been really actively working on, and I'm seeing results from it, of
Good.
letting go of the fear and letting go of the checking the bank balance every day. And what does that mean? What is the story I'm telling myself around what does it mean? And instead of going, oh no, I only have $30, that's today. Today you have $30. Tomorrow there will be. So I think that's really, I can't wait to read your book because I think it will be so helpful for me personally, but I also can see how this could benefit so many people. And I have a question about people who don't remember their dreams. There are
Yeah.
people I know, and they've always been men, but it's like, a lot of the men that I've dated are like, I don't know what you're talking about. Like, I don't dream. I don't know what you mean. And I think it might even be my sister's husband who's like, I don't have dreams. I was like, they do, but they don't remember them. What is that? What goes on in that
Yeah.
brain state?
You, there's probably multiple reasons. All of us dream. Each night we spend about 2 hours in the dream state. And so that means that by the time you're 24, you've spent 2 entire years in dreaming. And by the time you're 48, you've spent 4 entire years in dreaming. But what do we know about dreaming? And for most of us, we don't know very much, but we all dream. So I was giving a talk in the Denver area, and a young guy raised his hand and he goes, yeah, I don't recall dreams. I haven't recalled dreams in 10 years, and I'm 26. And I go, okay, what happened to you when you were 16? And he looked at me and he said, my parents got a horrible, nasty divorce. And I go, okay, that might be the cause. There might have been so much trauma in your waking life that you just shut down your dreaming at the same time too. But here's what I want you to do. Tonight, tell your inner self that you allow yourself to restart dreaming. That tonight you allow yourself to restart dreams. The next morning, I saw him walking in the hallway. As soon as he saw me, his face broke into a giant grin, and he said, "My dreams came back." And I go, "What do you mean?" He
Wow.
said, "Last night I did what you said. I told my inner self that I was ready to accept my dreams again." He said, "All night it was like a slideshow, just
Oh,
slide after slide of dream images from the last 10 years." He said he was so happy. So sometimes, sometimes we shut it down. We don't really realize we're doing it consciously, but we're having enough hard times in waking life, and so we can't handle the dream interpretation and the dreaming version. But here was another example of what happened. I was given a talk in the Bay Area, and at the end of it, all these people had questions. So now it's like I don't know 9:30 at night, and here's 20 people who want to ask me a personal question. My inner self told me the last woman in line had the most important question. So here she comes, the final last woman, and she speaks in a Russian accent, and she goes, I haven't remembered a dream in 2 years. You've got to help me. And I say, what happened to you 2 years ago? She said, my husband died. And I said, well, sometimes you have trauma. And she goes, no, it's not that. It's something else. I know it is. And I said, look, it's 11:30 at night in Midwestern time for me, and I need to get some sleep. You give me your email and I'll dream on this tonight and tell you what the issue is. So that night I went to sleep in order to dream about this woman's issue. The first dream I had, it showed me all the struggles she went through to get to America. And I was so in awe of the woman after that first dream. I thought, wow, what a tough cookie to deal with all this crap before she got here. Then the next dream, here was the dream. In my left hand, or in my right hand, I'm holding the leash of a jaguar. In my left hand, I'm holding the leash of, I think it was a whale. And these two power animals drug me through the dream state the whole rest of the night. When I woke up in the morning, I understood what was going on. I wrote the lady, I said, look, you're being called on a giant spiritual adventure. I don't have two power animals like this show up without someone being called on a giant shamanic adventure. I said, you're ignoring this spiritual gift that's been given to you now that your husband's passed away to rededicate your life to a spiritual pursuit. If you accept that, your dreams will come back. She wrote me back, oh, you don't know this, but I was at a Jaguar woman conference and they told me I was a Jaguar woman, but I didn't believe anybody. And then the next night she wrote me, my dreams came back.
That
So
is so cool. That's so good to know, to tell people if they don't dream that you just have to give yourself permission and
sometimes
intend.
is that simple. And sometimes we shut down our dream life because our dreams are encouraging us to grow. Our dreams are encouraging us to be our true self. Our dreams are encouraging us to go on our own spiritual adventure and pathway. And a lot of times people shut it down. And I have had some people who have done like micro dosing, and then suddenly their mind blows up and they're having lucid dreams all the time. And a lot of them are spiritual lucid dreams. And I'll ask them, when you were a kid, had you shut down your spiritual life? And almost invariably they say, yes. In my family, we just shut down, the spiritual side of ourselves. And then something happens and it's like there's all this energy there and it comes shooting out and manifesting itself in lucid dreams and all sorts of things. So it's really interesting, but I just want to encourage everyone, get in touch with your dreaming self. Just the idea of becoming aware of your dreams can really help you make it through your waking life experience. And so I just want to encourage everyone, you don't have to be a lucid dreamer, but just begin to remember your dreams and it'll just naturally help you.
This has been such a wonderful conversation, Robert. Thank you so much for taking the time to join me to share what you know with our listeners. I'm going to have the link to your website below that also has information about where to get your books. You can get them on Amazon. Um, I'm really excited to read them. And actually, now I'm thinking of gifting them to some people. My mother and I have always been very dream oriented and we talk about them, and my sister as well. So I thank you. This is and I loved also to find how your power to hear how your passion for this topic has led you into a whole career of diving into this and writing about this. And that's this is my passion, is talking about this too. And what we're doing is bringing this to light and letting people know that this is not all there is, that you can heal yourself through becoming aware of how your consciousness is driving you. There's so much in there. And Robert, you're just such a lovely person. So thank you for being here today. It has been such an absolute pleasure having you on.
Oh, thanks, Shannon. This is so much fun.